Sergeant Marcus Webb stood at attention in the grand hall of the Zarkathi Royal Palace, trying not to feel like a child surrounded by giants. The alien guards around him towered at least 3 feet above his 6-foot frame, their chitinous armor gleaming under the bioluminescent lights that pulsed along the vaulted ceiling. The Zarkathi were insectoid beings, elegant in a way that made Marcus think of praying mantises crossed with something almost regal. Their bodies were sleek and segmented, covered in natural armor that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue, and their large compound eyes reflected everything in fractured rainbows. Marcus had been assigned to the palace as part of Earth's Expeditionary Corps' diplomatic exchange program, a gesture meant to show goodwill between humanity and one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. He knew what it really meant, though humans were the new kids in galactic society, barely 50 years since achieving faster-than-light travel, and the older species wanted to keep an eye on them. Guard Commander Dexcall addressed the morning assembly in the clicking, whistling language of the Zarkathi, which Marcus's translator earpiece converted into clipped, formal English. The commander's mandibles moved in what Marcus had learned was disapproval as his compound eyes swept over the human. "The day cycle begins," Dexcall announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned over decades. "All Sentinels will maintain assigned positions with absolute precision, as has been our tradition for 10,000 cycles." He paused deliberately, letting his gaze rest on Marcus, even those from less disciplined species. Several of the Zarkathi guards made a chittering sound that Marcus's translator unhelpfully labeled as contemptuous amusement. He kept his face neutral and his back straight, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. The briefing continued with meticulous detail about the day's schedule. Queen Shivara would attend morning council at the 8th hour, proceed to the Hall of Petitions at the 10th hour, take her midday rest at the 13th hour, and so on. Every movement planned, every minute accounted for, everything running like the most precise clockwork humanity had ever imagined. Marcus found it both impressive and unsettling. Back on Earth, even the most secure facilities built in randomness changed guard rotations unpredictably. Varied routes and timing predictability meant vulnerability in human military doctrine. But when he had mentioned this during his first week, the guard commander had looked at him with what Marcus could only interpret as pity. "Your species confuses chaos with security," Dexcall had said, his mandibles clicking dismissively. "We have protected our royalty for millennia through perfect order, while your people were still discovering fire." Marcus couldn't argue with that history, so he had kept his mouth shut and focused on doing his job. His assigned post was in the Eastern Gallery, overlooking the Queen's private gardens, a position the other guards considered meaningless. Nothing ever happened in the gardens, and the post was far from the Queen's main chambers, which meant the human had been deliberately placed where he couldn't embarrass anyone important. He took his position as the palace stirred to life around him. Servants moved through the corridors in precise patterns. Maintenance drones hummed along predetermined routes, and everything happened exactly when it was supposed to happen at the 10th hour, exactly as scheduled. Queen Shivara entered the gardens below. Marcus had seen her before, but only from great distances during formal ceremonies. Up close, even from his elevated position, she was striking taller than her guards. Her natural armor was a deep royal purple that seemed to hold its own in her light, and she moved with a grace that suggested both strength and intelligence. She was reviewing reports on a holographic display that floated before her delicate clawed hands swiping through data with practiced efficiency. Beside her walked High Chancellor Vexner, his own armor marked with the golden bands of his office, speaking in low tones that Marcus's translator couldn't quite catch at this distance. Marcus watched them with the trained eye of a soldier who had survived 3 combat deployments before joining the diplomatic corps. Something about Vexner bothered him. Though he couldn't put his finger on what, the Chancellor's movements were perfectly appropriate, his posture respectful. Everything about him screamed loyal advisor. Maybe that was what bothered Marcus. It was too perfect. He mentally shook himself. He was being paranoid, seeing threats where there were none. Letting his human cynicism color his judgment of an alien culture he barely understood. The Queen and her Chancellor completed their circuit of the garden and departed. Leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts, the day continued with the same mechanical precision. Guards changed shifts at exact intervals, marked by a musical chime that echoed through the palace. Servants delivered meals and supplies according to schedules that hadn't varied in years. And absolutely nothing unexpected occurred over the following weeks. Marcus fell into the rhythm of palace life, though he never quite shook the feeling that something was wrong. He started keeping notes in his personal datapad, documenting the patterns he observed: shift changes at the 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 20th hours without fail. Supply deliveries every 3rd day at the 6th hour. The Queen's schedule varying only for major ceremonies. The other guards continued to ignore him, treating him like a piece of furniture that had been placed in an awkward location. Guard Commander Dexkull inspected his post once per week, always finding Marcus's performance adequate but never excellent, which seemed to disappoint him in some ways. The only break in the monotony came during his brief interactions with the Queen herself. It happened in the 4th week, during one of her garden walks. Marcus was at his post when she looked up and saw him watching, and instead of ignoring him as she usually did, she approached the gallery rail. "Sentinel web," she said, her voice surprisingly melodious even through the translator's mechanical interpretation. "You are the human, yes?" Marcus saluted crisply, his fist over his heart in the Zarkathi gesture of respect. "Yes, Your Majesty." Sergeant Marcus Webb of Earth's Expeditionary Corps. Her compound eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel like an interesting specimen under a microscope. "Tell me about your world," she said. And it wasn't quite a command, but wasn't quite a request either. "I have read the official reports, but I would hear it from one who lives there." Marcus hesitated, uncertain how honest to be, then decided that lying to a queen who could probably detect deception was a bad strategy. "Earth is chaotic, Your Majesty," he said carefully. "We have over 200 nations, thousands of cultures, and we've spent most of our history fighting each other. We only unified enough to reach the stars because we finally realized we had to, or we'd destroy ourselves." He expected disgust or dismissal, but the Queen's mandibles moved in what his cultural briefing had indicated was thoughtful consideration. "Chaos," she repeated. "Your species embraces disorder?" "Not embraces. Your Majesty survives it. We're not as advanced as the Zarkathi, not as elegant or organized, but we've learned to adapt, to expect the unexpected, to plan for things going wrong." Queen Shivara tilted her head in a very alien gesture. "An interesting perspective, Sentinel Webb. Perhaps that is why you always seem unsettled here in our palace." Marcus felt his face flush. He hadn't realized his discomfort was so obvious. "I mean no disrespect, Your Majesty. Your security is impressive, flawless even, but—" she prompted. "But on Earth, we learned that flawless systems often have invisible flaws," he admitted. "Perfect routines can become predictable, and predictability can be exploited." The Queen was silent for a long moment, and Marcus worried he had overstepped. But then she made a sound his translator rendered as amused acknowledgement. "You are likely correct. From your perspective," she said, "but we are not humans, Sentinel Webb. We are Zarkathi, and our perfection has protected us for 10,000 cycles." She turned to leave, then paused. "However, I appreciate your honesty. Perhaps there is wisdom in chaos that order sometimes misses." After she left, Marcus stood at his post feeling both honored and troubled. The Queen had actually listened to him, considered his words, which was more than any other Zarkathi had done since his arrival, but her words echoed in his mind. Our perfection has protected us for 10,000 cycles. The problem was, Marcus thought as he watched the palace continue its precise mechanical dance, perfection never lasted forever. Humans knew that better than anyone. They had built perfect systems throughout their history, and those systems had always, eventually, failed, usually at the worst possible moment. He looked down at the gardens below and wondered if his paranoia was justified, or if he was just a human seeing problems where none existed. Time, he supposed, would tell. Marcus's paranoia only grew stronger as the weeks turned into months. Every day brought the same routines, the same precise movements, the same mechanical perfection that made his soldiers' instincts scream warnings that no one else wanted to hear. He had started documenting everything in his personal datapad during his off hours, building spreadsheets and timelines that would have made his old intelligence officers proud. The patterns were so consistent, they were almost mathematical. Shift changes never varied by more than 30 seconds. Supply shipments arrived within a 5-minute window every third day. Even the Queen's personal movements followed routes that could be predicted. Weeks in advance, the Zarkathi saw this as the height of civilization. Marcus saw it as a security nightmare waiting to happen on the 43rd day of his assignment. Marcus noticed something that didn't fit the pattern. A maintenance worker in the distinctive gray uniform of palace support staff was performing repairs in a corridor that, according to Marcus's notes, wasn't scheduled for maintenance until the following week. It was a small thing, probably meaningless, but Marcus had learned long ago that small things often mattered most. He made a note of it, including the time, location, and the worker's identification number that was visible on their uniform. 3 days later, he saw another anomaly, a supply drone accessing the upper storage levels at the 18th hour, when all supply movements were supposed to occur during the 6th hour. He checked the palace security logs from his terminal. The access was properly authorized. Logged in the system with all the correct clearances, everything looked legitimate, which somehow made Marcus more suspicious rather than less. He tried to bring his concerns to Guard Commander Excal during the weekly inspection. Choosing his words carefully. "Commander, I've noticed some deviations from standard schedules," Marcus began. "Small things." But Excal's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as irritation. Sentinel web. "There are thousands of operations occurring in this palace every day," the commander said, his tone suggesting he was explaining something to a slow child. "Minor scheduling adjustments are normal and are always properly authorized. Do you see anything in the security logs that indicates a breach?" "No, Commander, but..." "Then there is no issue," Excal interrupted. "Your human tendency to see patterns in randomness is noted, but it does not apply here. We have protected the royal family for 10,000 cycles using these systems. While your species was still in caves, I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and leave security analysis to those with actual experience." The dismissal was clear. Marcus saluted and returned to his post, frustration burning in his chest. The problem was that Excal wasn't entirely wrong. The security log showed everything was authorized. Every anomaly had proper clearances, and Marcus couldn't point to anything concrete that indicated a threat. But humans hadn't survived thousands of years of warfare and betrayal by trusting security logs and official authorizations. They had survived by being suspicious, by questioning authority, by assuming that anyone could be compromised and any system could be exploited. Marcus decided that if the official channels wouldn't listen, he would conduct his own investigation. He started small, using his off-duty hours to walk the palace corridors and observe. The Zarkathi guards ignored him completely, considering him beneath notice, which made him effectively invisible. He tracked the maintenance worker he had seen, and discovered the pattern. The worker appeared once per week, always on a day when High Chancellor Vexner had private meetings in his chambers. Always in corridors near the Chancellor's wing of the palace. The supply drone was harder to track, but Marcus eventually noticed it made irregular trips to storage areas that serviced the royal kitchens and the ceremonial preparation rooms, areas where food and drink for the queen would be handled. His human paranoia started connecting dots that might not be there. What if someone was using authorized access to smuggle something into the palace? Something that wouldn't show up on the Zarkathi scanners, because those scanners only looked for known threats? It sounded crazy, even in his own head, like a conspiracy theory born from too many spy movies and not enough sleep. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. Even when they seemed irrational, he needed more information, which meant he needed to observe High Chancellor Vex, and more carefully. That was easier said than done. The Chancellor was one of the most important figures in the Zarkathi government, and the lowly Sentinel had no legitimate reason to be anywhere near his private chambers. But Marcus was nothing if not creative. He studied the palace layout and guard rotations until he found a solution. There was a seldom-used observation gallery that overlooked the Chancellor's private courtyard, ostensibly for ceremonial purposes, but practically abandoned most of the time. He started taking his meal breaks there. Sitting in the shadows and watching Vexner was the model of Zarkathi efficiency. His movements were precise, his schedule impeccable. His interactions with staff and other nobles were exactly as protocol demanded. For 2 weeks, Marcus saw nothing unusual, and he started to wonder if he really was just paranoid. If the stress of being surrounded by aliens who barely tolerated his presence was making him see threats that didn't exist then. On the 15th day, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. Vexner was in his courtyard, speaking with someone in the gray uniform of palace maintenance, the same worker Marcus had been tracking. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, and from Marcus's distance, he couldn't hear what was said. But he saw the worker hand something small to the Chancellor, something that Vexner quickly concealed in his robes before dismissing the worker. It could have been innocent, a report, a message, something completely legitimate. But every instinct, Marcus had screamed that it wasn't. Check the palace schedule. There was no official meeting logged between the Chancellor and maintenance staff, which meant this was off the books, unofficial. Hidden. Marcus felt his heart pounding. He needed evidence, something concrete that he could bring to someone who would listen. But what? He couldn't access Vexner's private records without authorization that would never be granted. Couldn't search the Chancellor's chambers without committing treason. Couldn't even ask questions without arousing suspicion. He did the only thing he could. He kept watching and kept documenting over the next 2 weeks. Marcus saw 3 more of these brief, unlogged meetings. The maintenance worker, a kitchen supervisor, even one of the palace's senior technology officers, all having quick, off-schedule conversations with the High Chancellor, all involving small exchanges of something Marcus couldn't identify. He expanded his investigation, cross-referencing every anomaly he had documented with Vexner's schedule. The pattern emerged slowly but unmistakably. Every irregular maintenance visit, every off-schedule supply delivery, every minor deviation from the palace's perfect routines occurred within hours of one of these secret meetings. Marcus's hands were shaking as he compiled the data. He had spent months in the palace, had learned the Zarkathi culture, had studied their history and their protocols. He knew that the High Chancellor was the second most powerful figure in the empire, that his loyalty to the Queen was considered absolute, that his family had served the royal house for 3,000 cycles. He also knew that in human history, the most devastating betrayals had always come from those considered most loyal, from those whose positions made them above suspicion. Marcus pulled up information about Zarkathi poisons. cross-referencing them with human chemical analysis. There was one called Tharnox, used in ancient times for political assassinations before modern security measures made it obsolete. It was lethal to Zarkathi, genetically targeted to work only on specific bloodlines, and supposedly undetectable by standard scanners. The record said it hadn't been used in over 2,000 cycles. That the knowledge of its creation was lost, Marcus didn't believe in lost knowledge. Humans had learned that anything that had once been known could be rediscovered by someone motivated enough. He checked the palace's upcoming ceremonies. The Grand Unity ceremony was scheduled in 3 days. One of the most important events in the Zarkathi calendar, Queen Shivara would drink from the ancient ceremonial chalice, a tradition that dated back to the founding of the empire. And the High Chancellor would pour the wine himself as protocol demanded. Marcus felt sick. If he was right, if Vexner was planning what Marcus thought he was planning, then the Queen had 3 days to live. If he was wrong, then he was about to destroy his career and possibly start an interstellar incident by accusing one of the most respected figures in the Zarkathi government of treason based on nothing but human paranoia and circumstantial evidence. Tried one more time to go through official channels, requesting a meeting with Guard Commander Vexcall and presenting his evidence. The unauthorized meetings, the schedule anomalies, the pattern of irregularities. Shishale looked at his data for approximately 30 seconds before dismissing it. Sentinel Web. What you have documented are minor administrative irregularities, the commander said, his tone mixing patience with barely concealed contempt. The High Chancellor has security clearance to meet with anyone at any time without logging every conversation. Marcus sat in his quarters, staring at the wall, his datapad clutched in his hands, his mind racing through options that all seemed to end with either his death or the Queen's. Had 2 days until the Grand Unity ceremony. After his confrontation with Guard Commander Vexcall, he had been officially relieved of duty, his access to most palace areas revoked, and a transport scheduled to take him back to Earth immediately following the ceremony. The Zarkathi were giving him one last chance to witness their greatest tradition before shipping him home in disgrace. Marcus almost laughed at the irony. They were letting him stay just long enough to watch the Queen die if he was right. He pulled up everything he could find about the Grand Unity ceremony on his datapad. The tradition dated back nearly 10,000 cycles to the founding of the Zarkathi Empire. A symbolic act where the Queen would drink from the chalice of unity to represent her bond with all her people. The ceremony was sacred, unchanging, observed by every noble house in the empire. The High Chancellor always prepared the ceremonial wine himself, pouring it from a sealed container that had been blessed by the religious caste. The Queen would then drink before the assembled masses, demonstrating her trust in her people, and their trust in her. It was perfect for an assassination, public, ritualistic, impossible to disrupt without committing blasphemy in front of thousands of witnesses. Marcus studied the security arrangements. The Grand Hall would be packed with nobles, the entrances guarded by the palace's best warriors, scanners running continuously to detect any threat. But those scanners, like all Zarka's technology, were designed to detect known dangers. If Tharnox poison truly was undetectable by their systems, then all that security was worthless. He spent hours researching the poison, cross-referencing every database he could access with his limited credentials. The information was sparse, classified, buried in historical archives that treated it like ancient mythology rather than real science. What he found terrified him. Tharnox was a bioweapon from the Zarkathi's early tribal period, created during their species wars before unification. It was genetically targeted, requiring samples of the victim's DNA to synthesize. And once activated, It caused cascade organ failure within minutes. The ancient text said it was invisible to the senses, undetectable by traditional means. And as certain as death itself, the only reason it had been abandoned was that genetic targeting made it useless for warfare. It could only kill one specific individual, but for assassination. That limitation became its greatest strength. Marcus checked the records. Queen Shivara had donated genetic material to the Royal Archives years ago as part of standard succession protocols. Material that would be accessible to someone with the High Chancellor's security clearance. Everything fit. The secret meetings, the careful timing, the use of authorized channels to avoid suspicion. Vexner had been planning this for months, maybe years, moving so slowly and carefully that even the perfect Zocati security system never noticed. But one paranoid human had noticed. And now that human had to decide what to do about it, Marcus's options were limited and all of them bad. He couldn't access the ceremonial wine to test it himself. Couldn't convince anyone in authority to listen. Couldn't even get close enough to the Queen to warn her directly. He could try to reach out to Earth's diplomatic corps, but they would never authorize action against a Tsar Cathy Chancellor based on his hunches. It would cause an interstellar incident, and Marcus would be sacrificed to preserve relations. He could try to warn the Queen publicly during the ceremony, but palace guards would stop him before he got within shouting distance, and even if he succeeded, it would be his word against Vexen as a disgraced foreign Sentinel versus the Empire's most trusted advisor, or he could do something so drastic, so unthinkable, that it would either save the Queen's life or end his own. Marcus made his decision. He spent the next day preparing, saying nothing to anyone. Acting like a defeated soldier heading home, he studied the Grand Hall's layout, memorizing every entrance, every guard position, every sight line. He reviewed the ceremony's precise timeline, noting when the Queen would enter, when she would approach the throne, when Vexner would pour the wine, when she would drink. The timing would have to be perfect. Too early, and he would be stopped before the threat was apparent. Too late, and the Queen would be dead. He also prepared a message, encrypting it with codes from his military days and scheduling it to transmit to Earth's Expeditionary Corps Command if he didn't cancel it manually. The message contained everything he had discovered, all his evidence, all his reasoning. If he died trying to save the Queen, at least someone would know why. The night before the ceremony, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his quarters thinking about his life, about all the choices that had led him to this impossible situation. He thought about Earth, about humanity's bloody history of betrayals and assassinations, about all the times in his species' past when one person with the courage to act had changed everything. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Queen Shivara in the gardens, when she had listened to his ideas about chaos and adaptation with genuine interest instead of dismissal. She had been kind to him, respectful when no one else in the palace had been. She didn't deserve to die because her perfect system couldn't imagine betrayal from within. Marcus sat up and recorded a final personal message, this one to his family back on Earth. He told them he loved them, that he was sorry, that he hoped they would understand what he was about to do. Then he deleted it. If he succeeded, he wouldn't need it, and if he failed, they were better off not knowing how their son had died. The morning of the Grand Unity ceremony arrived with the same artificial dawn that lit the palace every day. Marcus dressed in his formal uniform, the one he had worn on his first day, and made his way to the Grand Hall despite being officially relieved of duty. His diplomatic credentials still granted him access to the ceremony as an observer. He entered with the other foreign dignitaries. Feeling their curious stares, everyone had heard about the human Sentinel, who had been dismissed for paranoid accusations against the High Chancellor. Marcus ignored them and found a position along the eastern wall, where he could see the throne platform clearly. The hall was already filling with Tsar Cathy nobles, their armor polished to mirror brightness, Their ceremonial robes shimmering with bioluminescent threads, the air hummed with anticipation. This was one of the Empire's most sacred events, and everyone wanted to witness it. Marcus scanned the crowd for Vexner and spotted him near the throne, standing beside the ancient ceremonial chalice on its golden pedestal. The Chancellor looked calm, composed, exactly as a loyal advisor should look, but Marcus watched his mandibles, watched the way his claws twitched slightly, watched how his eyes tracked the entrances. These were micro-expressions, tiny tells that most wouldn't notice, but Marcus had been trained to read body language across species. Vexner was nervous. Not obviously so, but enough that someone looking for it could see. Marcus felt his own heart pounding. This was real. This was happening. And in the next hour, either he would be proven right or he would destroy everything. The ceremonial horns sounded, their deep tones reverberating through the hall. The crowd fell silent as Queen Shivara entered. She was magnificent. Her armor had been replaced with ceremonial robes of deep purple and silver that seemed to flow like liquid starlight. And her presence commanded absolute attention. Marcus felt a pang of fear, not for himself, but for her. This intelligent, graceful being who had shown him kindness was walking toward her death, and only he knew it. The Queen processed down the central aisle with measured steps, flanked by her honor guard. The crowd parted before her like water, thousands of Zarkathi bowing as she passed. She reached the throne platform and turned to face her people. The hall was absolutely silent, except for the soft hum of the recording drones that would broadcast this ceremony across the entire Empire. High Chancellor Vexner stepped forward, bowing low before his queen. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice amplified across the hall, "I present the chalice of unity, that you may drink and renew the bond between throne and people." Marcus watched as Vexner retrieved an ornate bottle from a secured container. The seal was intact, blessed by the religious caste as tradition demanded, and everything about it appeared legitimate. The Chancellor poured the dark purple liquid into the chalice with reverent care. Marcus could see scanners running continuous sweeps. Every security system in the palace was monitoring this moment, and all of them showed nothing wrong. The wine sparkled in the light. The chalice gleamed. Everything was perfect. Vexner handed the chalice to Queen Shivara with both hands, bowing again. She accepted it with the grace of 10,000 cycles of tradition. Marcus saw his moment approaching. The Queen raised the chalice toward her mandibles, beginning the ritual words that would accompany the drinking. He had seconds to act. If he moved too soon, guards would intercept him before he reached the platform. If he waited too long, the Queen would drink and die. Marcus took a breath and trusted his instincts. He pushed away from the wall and started moving. Not running yet, but walking quickly with purpose. The guards noticed him, but didn't react immediately. He was still a credentialed observer, and his movement wasn't yet aggressive. Marcus's boots hammered against the polished floor as he sprinted toward the throne platform. Around him, the hall erupted into chaos. Nobles gasping, guards moving to intercept, voices shouting commands in harsh Zarkathi. But Marcus had already calculated his angles and his timing. He wasn't trying to reach the Queen directly, which would be impossible through her protective circle. He just needed to get close enough. "My Queen, don't drink." His voice cut through the confusion like a blade, amplified by the hall's acoustics and the shocked silence that followed. Queen Shivara froze, the chalice mere inches from her mandibles. Her compound eyes found Marcus as he charged forward, and he saw confusion and recognition flash across her features. Then the guards hit him. The first one caught Marcus with a tackle that would have killed a human if not for the Zarkathi's careful training. They were taught to subdue, not kill, which gave Marcus the split second he needed. He twisted in the guard's grip, using momentum rather than fighting it, and managed to get one arm free. With every ounce of strength he had, he threw himself forward, fingers outstretched toward the chalice's hand connected with the ornate cup, just as 3 more guards piled on top of him. The chalice flew from the queen's grasp. Spinning through the air in what seemed like slow motion, Marcus watched it tumble, saw the purple liquid splash outward, heard the metallic ring as the ancient artifact struck the marble floor. Then his face hit the ground hard enough to make stars explode across his vision, weight pressed down on him from multiple directions. His arms were wrenched behind his back with enough force that he felt something in his shoulder pop, and something sharp, a ceremonial blade, pressed against his throat hard enough to draw blood. "Hold!" Queen Shivar's voice cracked like thunder, and the pressure on Marcus's neck eased slightly. Though the guards didn't release him, Marcus gasped for air. His cheek pressed against cold marble that was now splattered with the spilled ceremonial wine. He could see the broken chalice lying a few feet away. 10,000 cycles of tradition shattered in an instant. "Explain yourself." "Sentinel Webb." The queen's voice was cold with fury. "You have committed sacrilege before the entire empire. Speak quickly or die where you lie." Marcus struggled to form words through his bruised face and the weight crushing his chest. "Poison." "Your Majesty," he managed to choke out. "Tharonok's poison in the wine, genetically targeted to kill only you." The hall exploded with noise. Nobles shouting in outrage, guards demanding his immediate execution, voices crying blasphemy and treason through the chaos. Marcus heard High Chancellor Vexner's smooth voice rise above the rest. "Your Majesty, this is madness," Vexner said, and Marcus couldn't see him but could hear the perfect note of shocked concern in his tone. "The human has clearly lost his mind." The wine was blessed, sealed, scanned by every security system we possess. There is no poison, only paranoid delusion. Then tested. Marcus shouted against the marble. "Use human chemical analysis, not your scanners. Tharonok's is genetically engineered to be invisible to Zarkathi detection methods." "Enough of this." Vexner's voice turned sharp. "Your Majesty, I demand this human be executed immediately for his assault on your person and his destruction of sacred tradition. Every moment we delay dishonors." "You demand?" Queen Shivar's voice cut through Vexner's words like ice, and suddenly the hall went silent. Marcus felt the pressure on him ease slightly. Through his limited field of vision, he saw the queen's robes as she stepped closer. "High Chancellor, you presume much," she said quietly, dangerously. "The human has broken protocol, yes, but his haste to demand execution is unusual for one so normally measured in council." Marcus heard Vexner's mandibles click rapidly, a sign of agitation. "Your Majesty, I seek only to preserve the dignity of this sacred ceremony. The longer we entertain these baseless accusations, then testing the wine should quickly prove them baseless." The queen interrupted. "Guards, collect samples of the spilled liquid. I want them analyzed using human spectroscopic methods immediately." "Your Majesty." Vexner's voice rose in what Marcus recognized as genuine alarm, though the Chancellor tried to mask it as concern. To use alien methods on blessed ceremonial wine is itself a form of sacrilege. "I will determine what is and is not sacrilege in my own hall," Queen Shivar said, her tone brooking no argument. "The analysis will be performed. If the wine is pure as you claim, then the human will be executed for his crime, and the ceremony will be rescheduled. If the wine is poisoned..." She left the threat unfinished. Marcus lay still as he heard guards moving around him, carefully collecting samples of the spilled wine. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the whisper of nobles conferring in hushed voices. The weight on Marcus's back remained constant. He couldn't see most of the hall from his position, but he could feel the tension in the air like a physical presence. He tried to turn his head enough to see Vexner's reaction, but a guard's clawed hand pressed down on his skull, keeping him still. "Your Majesty, while we wait..." Might I suggest? Vexner began. But the Queen cut him off. You might suggest nothing, High Chancellor. You will stand exactly where you are until this matter is resolved. More minutes passed. Marcus's shoulder throbbed where it had been wrenched, and blood from the cut on his throat was pooling beneath his cheek. He started to wonder if he was wrong, if his paranoid human brain had seen patterns that weren't there, if he was about to die for nothing. And then he heard footsteps approaching rapidly. Your Majesty. A new voice, one of the palace's science officers. The analysis is complete. The hall held its collective breath. The results? Queen Shivara's voice was steady, but Marcus heard the underlying tension. The wine contains. The science officer paused, as if unable to believe his own readings. Tharnox poison, Your Majesty. Genetically keyed to royal DNA, completely invisible to our standard detection protocols. The human was correct. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus felt it like a physical weight, heavier than the guards holding him down. Then chaos erupted, nobles shouting, guards yelling commands, the sound of weapons being drawn. Silence. Queen Shivara's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Guards, release Sentinel Webb immediately and take High Chancellor Vexner into custody. Marcus gasped as the weight suddenly lifted off him. Hands helped him up, more gently than they had forced him down. Though his shoulders screamed in protest, he stood unsteadily, wiping blood from his face, and finally got a clear view of the scene. Vexner was surrounded by guards, their weapons trained on him, but the Chancellor made no move to flee. Instead, his mandibles moved in what might have been a smile. How delightfully ironic, Vexner said, his voice calm despite the weapons pointed at him, undone by a human's primitive paranoia. Your people's chaotic, suspicious nature was always incomprehensible to me. Your Majesty, I should have eliminated him first. You admit it then? Queen Shivara said, and her voice was cold as the void of space. You, whose family has served mine for 3,000 cycles, you would murder your queen? Not murder Your Majesty evolution, Vexner said, and now his composure cracked enough to show real passion beneath. The Zarkathi have stagnated under 10,000 cycles of tradition. We need change, new leadership, new direction. I would have given the Empire that. By poisoning me? The Queen's voice dripped with contempt. By removing an obstacle. Vexner replied, your death would have sparked a succession crisis, allowing the Reform faction to seize control. It was the perfect plan. Flawless in every detail. Except for one paranoid human, Marcus said quietly, and despite the pain. He felt a grim satisfaction as compound eyes focused on Marcus with something like hatred. Yes. Except for one paranoid human who couldn't appreciate perfection when he saw it, the former Chancellor hissed. Your species' chaotic nature, your inability to trust, your constant suspicion of order, it's a weakness that saved you today. But it will destroy you eventually. Maybe, Marcus said, meeting the alien's gaze steadily. But today, our weakness saved your queen. Queen Shivara gestured sharply to the guards. Take him to the containment cells. He will stand trial for high treason, she commanded, then added, and have medical officers attend to his co-conspirators immediately. I want everyone involved identified and arrested. As guards dragged Vexner away, the former Chancellor's voice echoed through the hall. You think this ends with me? The reform movement will continue. The Empire cannot survive unchanged forever. Then he was gone, and Marcus was left standing in the center of the Grand Hall, surrounded by thousands of shocked Zarkathi nobles covered in his own blood. With the shattered remains of a 10,000-cycle tradition at his feet, Queen Shivara approached him slowly. Marcus tried to straighten to attention, but his injured shoulder made him wince. Sentinel Webb, she said formally, her voice carrying across the silent hall. You have broken sacred protocol, destroyed a priceless artifact, and disrupted the most important ceremony of our people. Marcus felt his heart sink. Despite everything, despite being right, he was still going to be punished. You have also saved my life, the Queen continued, and exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed the Empire. The first crime pales against the second. You have my gratitude and the gratitude of all Zarkathi. The medical ward of the royal palace was quieter than Marcus expected. After the chaos of the Grand Hall, the soft hum of healing equipment and the gentle movements of medical staff felt almost peaceful. Marcus lay on a bed designed for beings much larger than himself. His shoulder properly set and wrapped in regenerative bandages that the Zarkathi physicians assured him would heal the damage within days. They had also treated the cut on his throat and the various bruises he had earned from being tackled by guards who weighed at least twice what he did. He was reviewing reports on his datapad when Queen Shivara entered. The medical staff immediately bowed and retreated, leaving them alone. Marcus tried to sit up, but the Queen waved him back down with one elegant claw. Rest, Sentinel Webb. You have earned it, she said, settling into a chair that had been brought in specifically for this visit. I came to check on your recovery and to speak with you about recent events. How bad is it, Your Majesty? Marcus asked, knowing she would understand he meant the conspiracy. Not his injuries. The Queen's mandibles moved in what he had learned to recognize as a sigh. Vexener had 17 accomplices within the palace staff, including 3 members of the guard and one of my personal advisors, she said, her voice heavy with a weariness that made her seem ancient despite her graceful appearance. The conspiracy ran deeper than we imagined. They called themselves the Reform Movement and believed the Empire had stagnated under traditional leadership. What will happen to them? Marcus asked. They will stand trial according to our laws. Queen Shivara replied, most will likely face exile or imprisonment. Vexener himself, she paused, will be executed, though he will be allowed the honor of a quick death for his family's past service. Marcus nodded. He felt no particular satisfaction in Vexener's fate, only a tired relief that the threat had been stopped. I've been thinking about what you said, the Queen continued, about human history and the lessons your species learned from chaos. It troubles me deeply that our perfection made us vulnerable in ways I never imagined. She looked directly at Marcus, her compound eyes reflecting the medical ward's soft lighting and fractured patterns. Tell me honestly, Sentinel Webb, was our entire security system flawed? Marcus considered his words carefully. He was still a diplomat, even if he was also now apparently a hero, not flawed. Your Majesty, but incomplete, he said finally. Your systems are brilliant at detecting external threats, but they assume internal loyalty. Humans learned we couldn't make that assumption because we've been betrayed too many times. So what would you suggest? The Queen asked, and Marcus heard genuine curiosity rather than offense in her voice. Randomness. Your Majesty, Marcus said, change guard rotations unpredictably. Vary the Queen's schedule. Introduce elements of chaos into the security protocols. Make it impossible for anyone to plan an attack based on perfect predictability. But that would violate 10,000 cycles of tradition, Queen Shivara said. Though her tone suggested she was considering it seriously, tradition is valuable. Marcus agreed, but survival is more important. You can modify traditions without destroying them. Keep the ceremonies but vary the timing. Maintain the protocols but change the specifics. The Queen was silent for a long moment, her claws tapping thoughtfully against the armrest of her chair. The noble houses will resist such changes, she said finally. They will see it as abandoning what makes us Zarkathi. Then make it clear that you're not abandoning your culture, just adapting it, Marcus suggested. Humans have this saying, the only constant is change. Maybe the Zarkathi need to learn that adaptation isn't weakness. It's survival, Queen Shivara's mandibles moved in what might have been amusement. You speak very boldly for someone lying in a medical But after defying my entire government, Marcus couldn't help but smile despite his injuries. Your Majesty gave me permission to be honest. I'm just following orders. The Queen made that clicking sound that Marcus had learned meant laughter. Indeed, she said. Then her tone became more serious. Sentinel Webb, I have a proposal for you. Guard Commander Thexcall has been relieved of his position for his failure to investigate your warnings. I need someone to oversee a complete restructuring of palace security. Someone who understands both the value of our traditions and the need for adaptation. Marcus felt his heart skip. Your Majesty, I'm just a sergeant. I don't have the experience or authority to... You saved my life when everyone else was blind to the danger. Queen Shivara interrupted. You saw patterns that my most experienced guards missed. And you had the courage to act even when it meant certain death. That is exactly the kind of thinking I need. She leaned forward, her voice becoming intense. I'm offering you the position of Chief of Security for the royal household, with full authority to implement whatever changes you deem necessary. You would report directly to me, outrank everyone except my personal counsel, and have resources to hire a team of your own choosing. Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was offering. Your Majesty, the noble houses would be furious if you put a human in charge of your security. Let them be furious, the Queen said flatly. They didn't save my life. You did, and perhaps they need to learn that wisdom can come from unexpected places. I would need to consult with Earth's diplomatic corps, Marcus said, his mind racing. This kind of position could have political implications. I have already spoken with your ambassador, Queen Shivara said, a hint of amusement in her voice. She was quite enthusiastic about the opportunity, though she did warn me that you have a tendency to ignore authority when you think you're right. Marcus laughed despite himself. She's not wrong. Your Majesty. Good, the Queen said firmly. I need someone who will tell me the truth even when it's inconvenient. Someone who will question my assumptions and push back against tradition when necessary. Can you do that, Sentinel Webb? Marcus thought about everything that had led to this moment. His weeks of paranoia, his documentation of patents, his willingness to risk everything to save someone who barely knew him. He thought about Earth and humanity's bloody history, about all the lessons written in failure and betrayal, about how his species' greatest weakness might actually be their greatest strength. Yes, Your Majesty, he said finally, I can do that. Queen Shivara stood, her robes flowing around her like liquid starlight. Then when you have recovered, we will announce your new position formally, she said, and we will begin the process of teaching the Zarkathi Empire that perfection is an illusion, but adaptation is survival. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Marcus. You asked me once how I knew you were unsettled in the palace, she said. Would you like to know the truth? Yes, Your Majesty, because you were the only one who seemed worried, she said simply. Everyone else moved through their routines with absolute confidence that nothing could go wrong, but you looked like someone expecting disaster at any moment. She clicked her mandibles in amusement. I thought it was because you didn't trust us. I never imagined it was because you understood trust itself could be a vulnerability. After she left, Marcus lay back against the medical bed and stared at the ceiling. In less than 3 months, he had gone from an unwanted foreign sentinel to the chief of security for one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. It was insane, impossible, and probably going to be the hardest job he'd ever attempted. But as he thought about the challenges ahead, restructuring an ancient security system, convincing a traditional society to embrace chaos, teaching aliens that human paranoia had value, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose's datapad chimed with a message from Earth. It was from his old commanding officer, who had apparently heard about the incident through diplomatic channels. Webb, the message read. I always said your paranoid attitude would either get you killed or save the galaxy. Glad it turned out to be the latter. Earth's proud of you. Even if you're still a pain in the ass, don't let the alien royalty go to your head. Marcus smiled and typed a quick reply. No promises. Sir. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the Grand Hall once again. This time, wearing the elaborate armor of a chief of security modified to fit human proportions, but still bearing the royal crest of the Zarkafi Empire. The ceremony was smaller than the Grand Unity ceremony, but every noble house had sent representatives, and Marcus could feel their stares ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Queen Shivara stood before her throne. Addressing the assembled nobles, "We have learned a painful lesson," she said, her voice carrying across the hall, "that our perfection made us predictable, and predictability made us vulnerable. The human sentinel Marcus Webb saw what we could not, and in doing so, he saved not just my life, but the stability of our empire." She gestured toward Marcus. "Today, I name him Chief of Security, with full authority to restructure our protective protocols. I know many of you question this decision, question whether a human can understand our ways." Her voice hardened. "But I would remind you that our ways nearly cost me my life. Perhaps it is time we learn from those who think differently than we do." The nobles stirred, but said nothing. Dissent in the Queen's presence was unthinkable. Marcus stepped forward, as protocol demanded, and knelt before the throne. Queen Shivara placed one clawed hand on his shoulder.